This is the next part of the tutorial where I'm casting on the stitches for the sleeve. I think I have 48 here. And I need 52. 49, 50, 51, that's 52. I count those and make sure. 48, 50, 52. And now I'm going to do 16 rows in knit one, purl one, twisted rib, which I'm sure you all know how to do by now. In the back of the knit stitch, and I'm using 3 and 3 point. You can't see the, get too close to the camera, you can't see, but the 3.25mm needles, and I'm going to do, like I said, 16 rows. But this is one I did earlier. I have to do the sleeve first because I'm doing this from my own head. I'm not using a pattern, so I had to work out everything first. So with doing 2 sleeves the same, I've done the first one, and this is the rib, and then when I come back I will tell you how the shaping needs to be done. And it's a set-in sleeve, so it's not a straight up. So I will come back and show that when I get that far. I'll do the rib first. Right, I've knit the 16 rows of the twisted rib, and I knit the first 4 rows of the pattern. You started off with a knit row and a purl row, and then started the pattern, and then I started the pattern off with knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and it ended with a purl 2. Doesn't matter whether you start with knit 2 or purl 2, it works out whichever end. And then I'm increasing on the 4th row, and then every 8th row after that, and the 4th row is on the wrong side. This is a pattern. If you do the increasing on the wrong side, it's easier to work it into the pattern when you've done that. So I've done it here and here. I'm keeping it as close to the edge as possible. And now I'm going to start the next row, and with that extra stitch, okay, I check the stitches before I start, and here there was 2 purls, so I would do 2 knit on those 2 stitches. It would be 2 purl on those ones, so that I'm starting with 1 knit. Then doing 2 purl, and then 2 knit, 2 purl. And there you can see it's keeping the pattern in the right place, and it's hardly noticeable where the extra stitches have been added. And so we'll just do those knit 2, purl 2 across the row. And that's all there is to the pattern, and you're just increasing on every 8th row until I have it written down on the book here. the sleeves using 3.25mm needles. We've cast on 52 stitches and knitting 1 by 1 twisted rib for 16 rows, which is 2 inches. Change to 4mm needles, knit in knit 2, purl 2 pattern. I haven't wrote down here, but you have to knit 1 row and purl 1 row first, the same as I did on the back and the sides. And increase each end. I put 5th row here. It's actually the 4th row. I'll have to change that. Cross that out. Where is it? The 5th row here. I'm right and looking down at the camera, so I hope that's right. Yeah, so it's increase each end of the 4th and every following 8th row to 72 stitches. Then knit to 16 inches, or that's what I did, up to 16 inches. That's 112 rows, or to the length that is required. So you just need extra rows if you want a longer sleeve. And for the armholes, I'll be casting off 6 stitches beginning of the next 2 rows, decreasing 1 stitch at each end of the 4th row twice, and then on every alternate row 11 times, and then decrease until 18 stitches are left and cast off these stitches. And that will be the sleeve. I'll show you the whole instructions for anybody that's following. That's all you need to see, really. But I will show a little bit when I get up to the armhole shaping and that. I've got to the armholes. I've knit 16 inches, which was the length I wanted. So anyone doing this will have knit the length that they wanted, and 16 inches for me was 112 rows. And I've done the decreasing as far as the stitches took me to, which was up to 72 stitches. So I'm now going to cast off 6 stitches at each end at the start of each of the next 2 rows. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to continue in pattern across the row. And I will meet you at the end of that row. And now at the start of the purl row, I'm going to cast off another 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to knit across this row and then knit 2 more rows. So I will meet at the end of the 3rd row, the 4th row, sorry. So that's 4 rows, including the 2 cast off rows. Now I'm going to knit 2 together. I'm going to slip 1, knit 1 and pass that slip stitch over, and then just carry on with the pattern across the row till I get to the last 2 stitches. Then I'm going to knit those 2 stitches. Now I'll meet you at the end of that row. I'm almost at the end of that row now. Purl 2 and knit those last 2 stitches together. And then I'm going to knit to the 8th row and do the same thing again. And I will meet up with you when I get that far. So I've decreased on the 4th row and the 8th row, and now we're going to do it on every other row, on every alternate row. And so slip 1, knit 1, pass the slip stitch over, and whatever stitch comes next. That's another knit stitch. And just follow the pattern to the end of the row. And I will meet you at the end of that row. And we're at the last 2 stitches, and we're going to knit those 2 stitches together. And then we're going to decrease on every alternate row then until we have, let's see, we've decreased 1 stitch at each end of the 4th row twice. That leaves 56 stitches. Then every alternate row 11 times, and that leaves 34 stitches. And then be every row to 18 stitches, and then cast off those stitches. So I'll come back when I get to the after I've done this part up to 34 stitches. So decreased 11 times on alternate rows, and now we're going to do it every row until there's 18 stitches left. So it's just the same as before. Knit 1, slip 1, pass that slip stitch over, and continue and pattern across the row. And I will meet you at the end of that row. Now at the last 3 stitches, I'm going to purl 1, the 2 together, and we're increasing on every row now, so let's just purl 2 together, purl across the row, now we'll meet you at the end of that row, And we are now at the end of the row, and we're going to purl those 2 stitches together. And that is how the decreasing goes until you have 18 stitches left, and then you're going to cast those stitches off. And I will come back when I come to cast those stitches off. So now I have 18 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and I'm going to cast those stitches off. Now I'll meet you at the end of that row. So that's the sleeve, top of the sleeve cast off. The needles. And all we need now is to sew all the pieces together. That's the second sleeve finished. And that's for another part of the tutorial. So that's the sleeve finished, and the instructions, you can see with the sleeves I use 3 25mm needles, cast on 52 stitches and knit in 1x1 twisted drape for 16 rows. That's 2 inches. Change to 4mm needles, knit and knit 2, purl 2 pattern, increase each end of 4th and every following 8th row until you have 72 stitches, and then I knit to 16 inches. That was 112 rows, or to the length that is required. And if you want a longer sleeve, you might do your increasing on every 10th row instead of every 8th row. And the armholes, I cast off 6 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. That left 60 stitches, then decreased 1 stitch each end of the 4th row twice. That left 56 stitches, then every alternate row 11 times. That left 34 stitches, then every row until there was 18 stitches left, and then you cast off those stitches. And I will be back with the next part of the tutorial when I come to sew this up. So give a thumbs up and subscribe.